Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to week 9. So we are going to go ahead and keep working with conversions. So this will be the last video, or I'm sorry, the last week kind of related to these different measurements, but we got a little bit more to do, and then we talk about some other stuff. And so one thing I want to talk about, which we've kind of already been using, but now we can kind of put a name to it, which is a conversion factor. So a conversion factor is a fraction or a ratio made of two quantities that are emphasis equal to each other but expressed in different units. So that's something that we've been kind of using already along the way to talk about these measurements. So a good example is, for example, if we look at 1 week to every 7 days. Notice a week and days definitely have different meanings. We can think of them as different units, but they're expressing the same thing right now. 1 week is also equivalent to 7 days. So notice these expressions are equal to one another, and these conversion factors, so again, this is a conversion factor, is what we use and what we've been kind of using some bit to help us with converting to a desired unit that we want. So I'm not always going to have 1 week. What if I want to know for 4 weeks? And of course, with now measurements that we're talking about related to down below, but in theory, that's what we've been doing. And again, we can use a fraction or a ratio, and we'll be talking about both. So one thing I want to make sure we emphasize is making sure that we're keeping the same order. So the way you write something, you want to get into the process that if I'm sticking to expressing week on a left-hand side, then everything on the left-hand side then should be also expressed in terms of weeks. Same thing for days. So again, you just want to be cautious about that you're making sure that you're kind of keeping the same order of how you're expressing the units. Okay, and here we can see a table that I've attached from the booklet. And again, it's just another list of equivalent measurements. So remember, if I ask on the final exam any sort of measurement outside of the metric system, so just like again, now notice we have pint, cup, ounce, all that good stuff, that I will give you this information, especially because some of this information, they are what's the word? They are approximations, possibly. These seem to be all definite values, but some of them are like approximations. Some in the book, different books maybe have different cutoffs for a decimal and stuff like that. So that is information that I will be giving you. Okay, so make sure to keep that in mind. And so let's talk about it. Just now, let's first talk about how to write these conversion factors as first fractions. So one thing that's the most important thing, and that's the whole big name of the game of a conversion factor, is you have to make sure they're the same thing. They're equal to one another. So the different units that you're talking about, you want to show that they're expressing still the same value. So for example, 1 week is equivalent to 7 days, but 1 week is not equivalent. We couldn't have 1 week to 6 days, because again, that's not true. That's not equal to one another. That's not the same thing anymore. So that's where we have to make sure and check in. Wait, is this the same value or measure, or the defining of the same measurement, but just in terms of different units. So now we can see that the numerator represents the quantity containing the units that you are converting to. So the top, the numerator, that is the desired unit. That is what, right. Sorry, I thought I read my work wrong. So this is the new unit. That's what you want. That is what you want your answer eventually to be expressed as, what you are going to have your answer within. The bottom, the denominator, that's what you're converting from. So that's the old guy. That's what you're originally given. So that is, we want to make sure again. So notice order matters. That is where we want to make sure we're keeping track of who's on the top, who's on the bottom, and then the same thing with ratios later on, with who's on the left-hand side, who's on the right-hand side. So remember the new one, who we're converting to, and then over the old one, who we're converting from. Okay, and then write the conversion factors as fractions for the following conversions. So let's look at a few examples. So grains to milligrams, you want to ask yourself, well, who am I converting to? Well, milligrams. So remember what we said, milligrams then what we're converting to, that's on the numerator. So here we can see then we want to go from grains to milligrams. So remember, we're going to over from. Well, we first need to know the equivalent measurement between them, what makes them equal, because again, there could be different values when they're not equal. There's at one specific value that they are equal to one another. And here we can see it's for every 1 grain is equal to 60 milligrams. So in this case, remember, what we're converting to goes on top. So that is the 60 milligrams. And remember, milligrams is abbreviated as mg. And we're going from 1 grain. So here we can see 1 GR. And remember, GR is how we abbreviate the unit grain. Okay, so pounds to grams. Again, you want to ask yourself, who are you converting from? Who are you converting to? We're going from pounds. So where's that going to be? That's going to be on the bottom. To grams. So that's going to be on the top. So the new unit is grams. So we want to then see, well, what is the relationship? Well, here, given, we know that for every 1 pound, we have equivalently 454 grams. So we have to remind ourselves who's going on top. Well, that was grams. And we know specifically 454 grams, since that's the equivalent value to the unit in pound for every 1 pound. And so you notice this is, again, the conversion factor. This is the equivalent measurement between 2 units that we use to help convert. So in last week's video, when we talked about stoichiometry, this was, when we talked about those fractions, that is what they're coming from, these conversion factors to help you get to the desired unit that you want. Okay, and we can do the same thing with ratios. So remember, when we first talked about, I think back in chapter 6, ratios and fractions, they mean the same thing. Yet again, they represent the same thing. So then since they represent the same thing, I should be able to interpret these answers in terms of fractions and ratios, because again, they're just different formattings. So the same thing, the 2 quantities have to be equal. That's the whole point of this, for just go back to maybe a trivial example like week and 7 days. In order for that statement to be true, you have to have specifically 1 week and 7 days, because again, 1 week is not equivalent to 6 days or 8 days. It's specifically 7. That is the number where they are equivalent, depending on some sort of measurement. So, and now we can proceed with how we specifically write this. So the quantity containing the units that you were converting to, that is before the colon. So remember that it goes back to the same thing in chapter 6 and how we represent values equivalently as ratios and fractions. So what we're converting to, that goes to the left of the colon, and what we're converting from, that goes after the colon. And again, it's the same thing like the fraction. So the new one goes on top. So remember, in ratio form, that means at the left of the colon. Okay, let's look at some examples. So write the conversion factor as ratios. So remember, you want to check in with yourself. Who am I converting to? Who am I converting from? Well, I'm going from grams. So that's the old unit. I don't want that no more. And I'm going to milligrams. So this is the new guy. So the new guy goes on the left of the colon. And remember, you need to know what is the equivalent measure between them. So where are they equal? Well, for every 1 gram, equivalently, I have 1,000 milligrams. So the way we could express it is, remember, 1,000 is the new guy. So 1,000 milligrams, what we're converting to, to the right of what we're converting from. So there is our answer. That is our conversion factor. Okay, same thing now with part B, milliliters to teaspoons. You want to ask yourself, what is my old unit? What is my new unit? What is my, who's going to the left of the colon? Who's going to the right? And again, we need to make sure to know, well, what is the equivalent measure between them? So teaspoons is the unit that we want to convert to. So that means that will go on the left-hand side. So remember how we abbreviate teaspoon? There was a few different ways. So whatever tickles your fancy. And then milliliters will go on the right, since that is what we're converting from. And remember, it is abbreviated M, capital L. And that is it for our first video. Stay tuned for the rest.